I want to address some issues coming out in the light of the killing of Charlie Kirk. The last time I addressed what is it that we can do in response to this, and now I want to talk about what we can't do. I, and this is kind of a complicated issue because as Christians we are to be upstanding. As Christians, we're not to oppose our enemy in a certain sense, but at the same time, we have to uphold moral values. And so there's basically two ditches on either side of the highway. On one side, you have characters like John Piper who say that Christians shouldn't even own a gun because they might be tempted to use it. And then on the other side, you have what we have right now are people, Christian conservatives, MAGA people, which there's nothing wrong with being MAGA except for when you take it too far in the sense of just of this, which is to say, and I keep hearing this in different places, Christians saying, well, words are not working, and so we're going to do to you what you've been doing to us. All right. Now, what we need is a measured response. Obviously, and I know this is probably true for every veteran in America who's a Christian conservative that saw that happen just 2 days ago. One of the things you might be thinking is like, well, we have guns and we know how to use them just as good as anyone else. And I keep seeing responses from Christians and conservatives saying things like, well, now you're going to get what you've been giving, or something like that. But let's be clear. What has happened in America with Charlie Kirk is someone who you didn't agree with, someone you disagree with, was speaking in public, and you murdered him because he's on the opposite viewpoint. He's in the opposite viewpoint of you. So, in this case, a leftist, most likely, because he didn't agree with Charlie Kirk, and because Charlie Kirk was outspoken, took the life of Charlie Kirk so that he would shut him down. Okay? And so, if you were going to do an eye for an eye here, it would result in some other political, outspoken, non-official on the left. Now, some wacko from our side is going to go over and kill him. That is not a Christian response. And I know a lot of Christians take Matthew 5. It says, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your garment also. And whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Now, Christians for 100 years have been turning Matthew 5 into some sort of view of hippie Jesus, that Christians should never have a gun. They should always just sort of be submissive to everyone they ever meet. But let's go through it one verse at a time. First, verse 38 says, you've heard an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Now, that is good biblical justice, in the sense that the government ought to pay the evildoer. In Romans chapter 13, it says that he does not bear the sword in vain, but he's God's messenger to punish the evildoer. In this case, the government of the United States and the state that the man murdered Charlie Kirk in should try him, convict him, and put him to death. Hopefully hung by the neck, or maybe firing squad. I don't know how they do it over there. But the best possible outcome, as far as justice goes, is that man who was a murderer is convicted, and if he's convicted, he'd be killed. So, however, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth was legal law, and the Jews were using it in every aspect of the life. They were using it for an excuse for what people are looking for now, which is vengeance. People see one of our guys get killed by a wacko, and now we're hoping, and I'm not, that some other political guy on the other side gets killed by a wacko from our side. That is not Christian, and we should not want that. And if someone was killed by a wacko from our side, on the other side, I would condemn it just as much as I condemn killing Charlie Kirk. Why? Because as Christians, we don't ask for vengeance. What we do is we ask for justice. And the sentiment here is that, well, words didn't work. Now we're going to go to violence. And I will say more about this in a second, but we have only begun to use words. Charlie Kirk is the most prolific word person that I've seen. The person who goes out in public and tells people about his beliefs and tries to create a dialogue with a bunch of people. We've only begun to do that. Most of the people who are listening to this keep quiet. Most of your average modern evangelistic Christian will not talk about politics ever, because they think the gospel is central. And this is the reason why all the liberals right now are so surprised to see you put "Rest in Peace Charlie Kirk" up on your Facebook page. It's because they didn't know you were even a Christian. They didn't know that you cared about Charlie Kirk. They didn't know that you were a conservative Christian. We haven't even begun to use our words. And the fact that the left has killed Charlie Kirk does not mean that we need to stoop to their level. What it means is that we need to start really actually using our words and pointing out how evil the Democrats are, and how evil all of these Democrats who are now celebrating the fact that Charlie Kirk got killed, how evil that side of the politics is. Now, so the right thing to happen in the case of this murderer, when he's convicted, is that he should be put to death. But what does it mean in verse 39? It says, "But if I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also." Now first, we need to look at the first part of verse 38, which says, "Do not resist an evil person." Now, that might seem like Jesus is saying that we should submit to everyone who comes to do evil against us. Okay? You might think that if you just had it with no examples. But in this case, Jesus gives 3 good examples. And let's go through them one by one. First of all, before we get to that, he says, "I say to you, do not resist an evil person." Now, the word here for resist is actually oppose, or if you wanted to use it in a different way, do not go to war with an evil person. Now, at a societal level, this means that we do not we do not up the violence. We don't increase we de-escalate. We don't escalate the war. What we do as Christians is we speak the truth and we stand boldly and everything like that. But is this scripture trying to tell us that we can't bear a sword, that we cannot be gun owners, we can't defend our own life? No, it's not. And when you go to church this Sunday, your pastor is either going to say nothing about this issue, or he's going to say something crazy like Christians should never use violence ever. And I noticed Tucker Carlson, and I'd love to talk to him, said that Jesus sort of advocates that we not use violence, not even for self-defense. That is ridiculous, okay? And let's look at the 3 examples. He says, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also. Now, to get slapped on the right cheek, it's a backhand of a left hand. And in the Jewish culture, that was a big insult. And you see it even a couple hundred years ago. Whenever somebody wanted to challenge someone to a duel, they would slap them with their gloves or whatever, or slap them in the face. It was to say to openly dishonor someone, and it was meant in that culture and later on in culture. If you slap someone in the face, you're basically initiating a fight with them. You're saying, let's go to war. Well, Jesus says, don't go to war. If someone slaps you on the face, be like, hey, I don't want to fight. That's what, go ahead, here, slap the other side. We are not going to fight you in the same evil way that you fight us. Okay? You understand, as Christians in this time on earth, we have an obligation to be Christian in our approach. And that is to say, we're not going to fight the Democrats. They're evil, yes. And all these Christians who call themselves Democrats, they're part of an evil organization. And the world we live in now is that Democrats kill people they don't agree with. Okay? But we're not going to be like that. Because that's not what we do. What we need to do as Christians is to be bolder, to speak louder, and to make peace in a biblical sense, not in the way that your pastor means. Your pastor is going to tell you, okay, maybe we spoke too loud about politics. Let's tone it down. Appease the evil person. Give them whatever they want, right? And then we go to verse 40. It says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your garment also. Now, what does it mean to sue someone? That is to say, in this culture, and it was just the same way with that culture, is to say, you owe me that tunic, or you might say, that's my jacket that you've got on there. It's got my name on it. And then I pull it off and I say, look, it doesn't have your name. And he says, yeah, but okay, I didn't put my name on it, but that's still my jacket. And then you say, okay, buddy, if you really want to sue me for my jacket, you can have it. Here, let me give you my shirt as well. I mean you no wrong. You're the one doing evil here, not me. I am not going to respond evil with evil. I'm not going to go to war with you. I'm going to do as much good as I can to convince you that I am the one who is righteous and good because I obey the laws of God and because I'm in Christ. And so once again, we see another example of, now this is not an example where someone's trying to actively rape you or try to kill you or really even cause you major physical damage. What we're seeing here is people despitefully using you and you responding with love and consideration above and beyond what a sinner on the street would. You're saying, okay, you slap me on the face, slap the other side. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to be the one to initiate a war with you. Now, what happens if the guy throws a blow that could break a tooth? At that point, I believe, and there's nothing in Scripture to say otherwise, that you ought to defend yourself. And in the Reformed tradition, when we look at the words, you shall not kill, in the Ten Commandments, in the Reformed, if you look at the Catechism, you'll see that our view is that we should preserve life and safety of ourselves and others. And so when this is not the same as someone insulting me by slapping in my face. When someone goes and grabs the knife and goes to stab me, I have not just a right to defend myself, but according to the laws of God, which says we ought to preserve life, I have a duty to fight that person, even to the death, to try to preserve life, which is one of the Ten Commandments. And then in verse 41 it says, whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. Now, what is that referring to? Well, in this case, verse 41 is talking about the government, because at this time the Roman soldiers had a lawful right to, if they ran across any citizen or non-citizen, whatever, anybody on the road, they could ask the guy to carry their pack for 1 mile. That was the law. And so what it's saying here is, if someone has legally uses force to make you do something, you should go above and beyond to make them know that you're not opposing them, that you are not mad, like you're a Roman soldier and I'm a Jew or whatever, and we're going on the road and you have a heavy pack to carry, and you've been carrying it for all day and you need a rest, and you have to make your trip all the way. The Roman government has demanded that you do this and carry this heavy stuff, and the only way that you're going to get there in time is if you use the laws that the Roman government has said and force me to do my duty according to the Roman government. I'm not going to make you feel bad as a lawful military person for exercising your duty. And I'm not only going to not make you feel bad, I'm going to walk another mile, and I'm probably going to tell you, you're doing a great job. Thanks for keeping us safe on the way. Do you see how this works? So Christians are not selfish. They wouldn't tell if a police officer says, please get out of the car, give me your ID and so forth. And you say, here's my ID, officer. Is there anything else you need? How can I help you today? I'll give you whatever you want. That is how we approach a police officer who's trying to do his duty before God, is with a deep amount of respect, and we go the extra mile on the behalf of our police officer to show him, I'm not opposed to you. I am a Christian. I love you, and I'm willing to help you do your job, and I'm even willing to walk the extra mile. If someone thinks they have any sort of claim against you, that's what it means to sue you. This is not somebody robbing you at gunpoint. Jesus is not talking about whether or not you should be complicit with someone who's trying to break the law. What he's saying is somebody here is suing you. They're saying, I have a right to that which you have. And in this case, we say, look, I don't believe you have a right to it, but because I'm a Christian, I want to show you that I have nothing against you. Let me give you this and this as well. I want you to know I am not going to war with you. I am your friend. Here you go. And then whenever someone slaps you on the face, you say, you go ahead and slap me on the other. I don't hate you. I'm not going to war with you, buddy. Now, if he goes to punch you in the mouth and break your teeth and maybe even put your life at risk, now we're in another territory. And so self-defense is on the table, guys. If you look at Luke's chapter 22, verse 35, Jesus says to them, when I sent you out without money, belt, and bag and sandal, did you lack anything? And they said, not a thing. And he said to them, but now whoever has a money belt is to take it along. Likewise, also a bag, and whoever has no sword should sell his garment and buy one. For I tell you, that which is written must be completed in me. He tells you that which must be completed in me. And he was numbered with transgressors. For that which refers to me has its completion. In other words, before the end of the ministry of Jesus Christ on the earth, Jesus has preserved all of his disciples. And the end of John chapter, at the end of John, when he's in Gethsemane, it says that Jesus had said, I will not lose a single one. And he tells the guards, let my disciples go. And so Jesus' ministry, part of it was preserving all the lives of his disciples during his ministry. But now he says, when I sent you out before, you didn't have a belt and bag and sandals and so forth. Now you're going to have those things because he's going to be numbered with the transgressors. And now the time of persecution has come. And therefore he tells them to keep a bag. And this is important, guys. We need to be prepared for a time when we have to use a just force. When we have to defend ourselves or others. That's why Jesus says, you have a bag, you have a sword, you have a garment, you have a bag, and you have a belt, money belt. In other words, you should store up extra stores in case that there's trouble. And you should also have a sword if you sell your extra garment and buy one. Why? Because now the protection that Christ offered is off, and it's now appropriate for these Christians to now be able to defend themselves. Now, am I saying that we ought to fight the government? No, and I think this is where a lot of times that our self-defense ends. If we have a government that has been duly appointed to, let's say they pass a law that says Christians are illegal and they need to be put to death or something. I do not believe that unless we have the will of the people, that we can justly go to war with the government. So if I'm in my private home and the government comes with an actual warrant with intending to take me to jail so they can put me to death, I have a duty to flee from them, but I do not have a right to take their life. Jesus says if they persecute you in one town, flee to another. And we see that Paul dealt with robbers on the road and so forth. I do believe that Christians ought to use whatever force is necessary to uphold the laws of the land and to protect their own life and the life of others to this extent, wherever it's lawfully or ought to be lawfully done. But in the case where you have a government arresting you specifically because you're a Christian, in that case, that's where I would say you don't use the sword. We see that Jesus tells Peter to put away the sword. Those who live by the sword die by the sword. And he says, how else will the Son of Man suffer, and so forth. So that was the high priests and the Roman government with rightfully or wrongfully having chosen to take Jesus into custody, and Jesus said that not to fight them. And that's exactly where where we part ways. Now, so what am I saying? As Christians, we do not want to escalate to violence with those non-Christians. I know that there's a lot of people on the left who call themselves Christians. They are not Christians. They are for murdering babies. They're for homosexuality. They're for transing the kids. They may say, I'm not for any of those things, and yet they support those things. However, they are our enemies in a certain sense. They're an enemy of the truth, and that's what comes clear with the killing of Charlie Kirk. Okay? So, we are to turn the other cheek. Now, we're going to demand that our government give us biblical justice and put this man who did this murder to death. Because that's right. In Genesis it says, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. It is right under the proper authority and in a legal way for someone to exercise violence to uphold the laws of God and to love his neighbor. We are going to demand a death sentence for this man. However, I am not going to be for any wacko on the conservative or the far right side killing someone who is relatively innocent on the left. Somebody who, like Charlie Kirk, just speaks their mind, wrong as they are. And even though they're for murdering babies, I am not in any way going to support an eye for an eye going to war with the left. There may be a time when we have a lesser magistrate or the government overreaches in such a way that's tyrannical that we can, in defense of the Constitution, take up arms. But even then, if that ever happened, we would be doing it justly, and we would be fighting a moral war. Now, but what we see here with people saying, it's time, we're going to give them what they've given us, and so forth. You're talking about specifically what Jesus talks about in John chapter 5 when he says, do not resist an evil person. It's not that we don't defend our lives. We do. We ought to. In fact, everybody listening ought to own a gun. Everybody listening ought to have taken a gun safety course and should know how to handle a handgun or whatever gun they have within 15 feet. You need to be able to be accurate and precise so that you only take the life of those who God demands should be to defend your life and the life of others. You ought to own guns in case, as the Constitution provides, that we ought to be able to have a well-armed militia to overthrow an evil government. These are great things, and these are all morally derived from Scripture. As Christians, we want to protect the life of ourselves and our families and our neighbors. We want to love our neighbors, and sometimes by force if necessary. If someone's breaking into my neighbor's house and trying to hurt my neighbor, I'm going to go over there and I'm going to stop them with violence. And that is me loving my neighbor. And we live in the United States where the laws are set up in such a way that each citizen has not just a right but a duty to uphold moral law, which means that if someone's getting raped or murdered or attacked, we ought to use force to stop them. And so everyone needs to be ready in case there is a time when we need to defend ourselves and others. We need to own a gun. We need to know how to use it. We need to have that extra bag that Jesus talks about, which means we need to be prepared as far as having extra water supplies, extra food supplies. We need to have a gun so we can love our neighbor, you see. But we don't need to go to war with the left. We do not have a clear moral path to any sort of thing like that. And we need to tone it down with the rhetoric. I keep seeing people say things like, this is it, y'all. We're gonna now. We do. The truth is, on the right side, on the conservative side, I know several veterans who are very skilled at being able to exact massive amount of vengeance on people. And I grew up with them. I went to high school with them. Great guys and so forth. But they know, because they're in the military, that they don't. They probably know they don't have any moral grounds right now to do something like this. Only sniveling cowards would do what that man did to Charlie Kirk. And you wouldn't want to do that to somebody on the left either. It's just cold-blooded murder. We do not want to see an escalation of what happened to Charlie Kirk. What we want to do, now here's what the thing is, and here's the temptation. The devil will always use events to tempt you into thinking you ought to sin today. Somebody makes you mad, and so instead of you going to them and doing the Christian thing and trying to be a peacemaker, which is to say, hey, it really made me angry when you did that. This is a very humble thing to do. The devil is going to say, well, this person is so disrespectful, maybe I ought to punch him in the face. Or maybe I'm going to go home and have another couple of drinks or whatever. The devil is always going to tempt you to use sin when righteousness would do. And people are saying, well, words didn't work. We've been trying words for a long time, and it hasn't happened. Guys, we have not been trying words. Over the last 100 years, the pastors you have been listening to have been teaching you to, placate the left. Do not confront sin with people. Don't ever talk to people about religion or politics. They have been teaching you, we only want to talk about the gospel with people. We don't ever want to talk about their sin. We don't want to confront their sin because, the gospel's more important. Stuff like that. Guys, we have got to become... it's not that words haven't worked. We have not even begun to use our words. If you go to a church and they are silent this week about this issue, or worse, they tell us, boy, it's bad on both sides, and we want to make sure that we give space, and we don't talk about this stuff. We don't talk about politics with people, and we don't want to stir up anything. Get out of that church. If you're in a church that hasn't talked about abortion in the last 2 years, get out of that church. What are you doing there? Your pastor is not wanting to be the salt and light in the community that we need to be. We need to get out in our community and tell them, I am for Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is Lord, and it is right for our government to restrain evil. Homosexual marriage is wrong, and it should be illegal. Abortion is wrong, and it should be illegal. And everyone who sides with it is on the side of the devil. My guess is, though, that you don't have a pastor that's ever said anything like that. Get out of that church. You yourself, lead your family in Bible study. If you don't know what you believe about political issues, do a Bible study about those things. Teach your family. Grow up children who speak to their friends and let everybody know this is not the way that a nation is run. Words have not even begin to have an effect. We have lived in a pragmatic world our whole lives. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. When somebody walks in the room, everyone says, oh, don't talk about it around those people. It's time for us to become vocal about the truths, not just of the gospel, but those other issues which are part of the gospel about morality and godliness. We need to win the culture back with words. And yes, have your concealed carry with you. And that way you can speak boldly, but if someone tries to harm you, you can defend yourself. That's all great. But we do not need to escalate the violence. This political assassination, it needs to end here. The right wing needs to be the moral wing. The leftists have always been immoral. They're going to always be immoral, but if we go to violence on the right, it's just going to escalate and it's going to get worse. But we need to stand up as Christians and try not to go to war, but to speak boldly with people. Yes, having a concealed carry on you, just in case you have to defend yourself. But go and speak boldly in public with people at work, at home, in your church. And if you have a church that you can't speak the truth about God's morality in, go find a biblical church.